I knew he had a wife. I told myself I wouldn't fall for him, but emotions don't ask for permission, and by the time I realized how far I'd gone, it was already too late. My name is Laura. I'm 34 years old, single, and I never imagined I'd be the kind of woman who'd fall for a married man. But love doesn't always walk in through the front door. Sometimes it sneaks in through the cracks, the lonely conversations, the lingering glances, the moments that weren't supposed to mean anything. He wasn't just any man. He was kind, attentive, safe, and that made it worse. You never wake up thinking today will be the day that changes everything, that you'll meet someone who shifts the ground beneath you. But some people walk into your life like a quiet storm. You don't see them coming, but when they leave, nothing is where it used to be. That's what meeting him felt like, a slow, steady unraveling of all the rules I thought I would never break. And at the center of it, curiosity, connection, and a kind of emotional closeness I didn't know I was starving for. It started with something small, harmless even. I worked in the same office building as Daniel. He worked upstairs in architecture. I was downstairs in admin. We shared the elevator every morning, made small talk about the weather or the coffee machine, nothing inappropriate, nothing risky. Until the day I saw him crying in his car. He didn't know I saw. He was sitting in the parking garage, head down, shoulders shaking. When I saw him later that day, he smiled like nothing had happened. That's when I started noticing him differently, not just as a co-worker, but as a man carrying something heavy. I don't know why I noticed that day in the parking garage more than the others. Maybe it was because I had also cried in my car before work more times than I care to admit. Or maybe it was because he looked so human, so raw. He was always put together in the office, sharp shirt, charming voice. But in that moment, he was just a man falling apart. And something in me responded to that. After that, I found myself looking for him. Not in a creepy way, but I paid attention. I noticed when he was quiet. I noticed when he wore the same shirt 2 days in a row. I noticed everything, because a part of me already knew I was going to get attached, and I couldn't stop it. We started having lunch together, just once a week, then twice. Then it became every day. We laughed, we talked about books, about life. He told me about his kids, 2 boys, never said much about his wife, and I never asked. I told myself we were just friends, that I just cared about him, that it wasn't crossing any lines. But one afternoon, we sat too close at a work event. His hand brushed mine, and neither of us pulled away. It was electric, terrifying, real. That night I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling thinking, what am I doing? He started opening up to me in small ways, talking about his college years, his love for old jazz records, how he missed cooking real food since his kids were picky eaters. I told him things I hadn't told anyone in years, that I hated sleeping alone, that I never truly felt safe with someone, that sometimes I felt invisible in my own life. We shared these truths like people on a raft in the middle of a quiet sea, drifting together in something that didn't feel dangerous yet. But deep down, we knew the tide was changing, and we were letting it. There were tiny moments I didn't write down but still remember, like the way he used to laugh at my dry jokes, or how he always noticed when I wore something new, even if it was just earrings. He had this gentle, warm way of making you feel seen. Not just noticed, really seen. We never talked about his marriage directly, but I could sense the loneliness in the spaces between his words, and I filled those spaces with smiles, conversation, presence. Not because I planned it, because I couldn't stop myself. Some afternoons we didn't talk much. We just sat across from each other in the break room, quietly eating lunch, occasionally making eye contact and exchanging a knowing smile. It was strange how safe that silence felt, like nothing needed to be said because everything was already understood. He once brought me a coffee on a Monday morning after I'd had a bad weekend. He didn't ask what happened. He just handed it to me with a quiet, "Rough weekend?" I nodded. He nodded back. That was it. But it meant everything. I never thought emotional intimacy could sneak up like that. But it did. And soon I found myself waiting for those moments, for his presence, for that subtle light he brought into my day. One Friday evening, we stayed late after a project deadline. Everyone else had left. We were reviewing floor plans and eating vending machine snacks. He looked up from the blueprint and said, "I feel more myself when I'm around you." That sentence changed everything. I felt like someone had torn open a wall inside me. I wanted to run. I didn't. We didn't kiss. We didn't touch. But something crossed over that night, and we both knew it. The guilt started like a whisper. Then it grew louder every day. I watched his phone light up with messages from Emma, his wife, and I felt sick. What was I doing? Was I the villain in someone else's story? Was I helping someone destroy a family? But he kept coming back, kept opening up to me, kept saying how empty his marriage felt, how he hadn't felt seen in years. And I believed him, not because I wanted to, but because part of me needed it to be true. I started avoiding mirrors. When I saw myself, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, one who smiled too wide when she saw his name in her inbox, one who paused before replying to his messages, savoring the moment. I was becoming someone who waited for a married man's affection like a teenager waits for a crush to text back. And I hated that. I wasn't sleeping well. I jumped every time my phone rang. Every time he talked about his family, my stomach twisted. But I still didn't walk away. There's a kind of shame that lingers when you feel like the villain in someone else's story, even if you never cross the lines. I used to wake up feeling like I owed someone an apology. But over time, I learned to forgive myself for being human, for longing, for believing, because I didn't ruin anything. I just walked too close to something I should have observed from afar. That doesn't make me heartless. It just makes me human. Guilt doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, "You knew better." And that voice stuck with me, in the quiet, in the dark. It made me shrink from my own reflection. But slowly, I learned to speak back, to remind myself that loving someone isn't a crime. That feeling is human. And what we do with that feeling, that's what defines us. I didn't destroy anything. I didn't cross lines. I just fell too hard in a place where no one was meant to fall. It wasn't some dramatic moment. No big affair, no confrontation, just silence. He pulled back, said he needed space, that he loved our friendship but couldn't let it go further. I agreed, said I understood. But inside, I was breaking. I had built a quiet world around someone who couldn't stay in it. I stopped going to the lunchroom, took the stairs instead of the elevator. He stopped emailing. Weeks passed, months. That silence wasn't cruel. It was careful, like we were both standing on opposite ends of a crumbling bridge, knowing neither of us could step forward without falling. But we couldn't turn away either. He started avoiding the break room. I stopped lingering by his floor. Everything became quiet tension. But in that silence, I started to hear myself again, and I realized I had handed over too much of my peace to something that could never be mine. I thought the ache would fade. It didn't. Not at first. I went on dates. I tried to forget. But every time someone asked me what I was looking for, I thought of Daniel, of conversations unfinished, glances that meant too much. And then one day, I saw them. At the grocery store, he was holding hands with his wife, smiling, like nothing ever happened. That night, I cried until my chest hurt, not because he chose her, but because I had chosen someone who was never mine to begin with. I remember deleting our messages one night, hundreds of little moments, gone in a second. I wanted to pretend it never happened, but the silence they left behind was deafening. I'd read a message 10 times before hitting delete. My thumb hovered. I cried over emojis. That's how deep it had gone. Even now, I sometimes hear a voice that sounds like his, and I turn around before I realize it can't be him. That's the thing about emotional connections. They don't leave scars. They leave ghosts. There were nights I'd scroll back through old messages just to feel something. Then I'd delete them again, angry at myself. Grief doesn't always look like mourning a death. Sometimes it's mourning something you almost had, something that only existed between two hearts that could never speak aloud. There were weeks when I avoided places we used to go, the cafe on 9th Street, the park bench near the office, even the song that played the day I knew I was falling. I thought distance would help me forget. But healing doesn't come from forgetting. It comes from facing it and choosing to continue anyway. I began creating new memories, reclaiming the old spaces, sitting at the cafe with a book instead of waiting for someone to meet me, making that bench mine again, just mine. Sometimes healing feels like reliving. You walk into a room and remember the moment he smiled at you there. You open a drawer and find a note he scribbled during a meeting. Little things become echoes. They follow you, and each time you have to decide not to follow them back. There were nights I questioned my intuition, wondered if I made up the connection, exaggerated the emotion. But deep down, I knew what we had was real. It just wasn't sustainable. And maybe that's the part that hurt most, letting go of something true because it wasn't right. Now, a year later, I don't hate him. I don't hate myself either. I see now that what I felt was real, but it wasn't right. And those are two different things. Sometimes the people who make you feel the most alive aren't meant to stay. They're meant to wake you up. He reminded me I was capable of deep love, that I could feel again after so many years of numbness. And for that, I thank him. Not with a message, not with words, just with the quiet peace of moving on. One day I walked into a bookstore and saw a novel we used to talk about. I picked it up, read the first page, and smiled. Not with pain, with warmth. Like remembering a beautiful song that used to make you cry, but now just feels like a part of your past. That's when I knew I was healing, not because I forgot him, but because I could remember him without falling apart. I remember a day when I walked past a family in the park. A man was holding his daughter on his shoulders, laughing, while his partner took a photo. For a second, I imagined that was us, that he had chosen me, that I had a life where the love was open, full, and public. But then the moment passed, and I felt peace, because that wasn't my life, and I was done fantasizing about futures built on someone else's foundation. You can love someone and still walk away. You can miss the idea of them and still know that letting go was the right choice. I think the hardest part wasn't letting him go. It was letting go of the version of myself that had hoped, that had imagined what it would be like to be chosen. You see, I never wanted to take something that didn't belong to me. I just wanted to feel what it's like to be wanted. Not temporarily, not in secret, but fully. He made me feel seen in ways I hadn't felt in years. And that's what made the loss so painful. Not because he was mine, but because the connection felt like it should have been allowed to exist openly. But I came to learn that not everything that feels right is right. Some connections arrive only to show us our capacity to feel, to remind us what we need, and what we must never settle for again. Letting go isn't a single moment. It's a choice you make over and over, to stop rereading old messages, to stop looking for meaning in coincidences, to stop searching for him in everyone you meet. It's not easy, but it's necessary, because if you don't let go, there's no room for something new to find you, and I've finally made room. If you're someone watching this who's fallen for someone unavailable, I see you. You're not evil, you're not broken, but you are worthy of a love that doesn't come with guilt. Walk away before it costs you too much. You'll cry, you'll grieve, but one day you'll breathe easier, and when that happens, you'll know you made the right choice. Healing isn't linear. Some days I felt fine. Other days, the emptiness hit like a wave out of nowhere. But over time, the waves got smaller, and I got stronger. I started therapy. It wasn't easy at first, admitting how deep I'd let myself fall for someone I could never fully have. But in those sessions, I learned to forgive myself, to stop romanticizing the pieces he gave me while ignoring the parts he never could. Eventually, I started painting again. It had been years. I turned my spare room into a studio, filled it with light and color. It became my sanctuary, a place where no guilt lived. Last month, I went on a date, just coffee, no expectations. He was kind, present, uncomplicated. I don't know where it'll go, and I'm okay with that, because I've finally come home to myself. And if you're still in the middle of it, wondering when it gets better, let me be proof. It does. I think about the version of myself from 2 years ago, the one who waited by her phone, whose heart raced at a simple good morning message, the woman who knew better but couldn't stop feeling. I want to hug her, not scold her, because she was trying. She was holding on to something that felt meaningful, even if it was borrowed. She needed connection, not complication, and that's what she mistook for love. Now, when I walk past our old office building, I don't look up at the windows. I don't wonder if he's inside, because I'm not that woman anymore. I outgrew the version of me that needed validation from someone unavailable. And I hope, if he ever thinks of me, it's with a softness, not guilt, not pain. Just two people who crossed paths at the wrong time, for the right reasons, to teach, to awaken, to move forward. In a way, I think we all carry a version of ourselves we're still trying to forgive. For me, it was the woman who saw warning signs but kept walking, who held on to small kindnesses like they were lifelines. But that version of me was doing her best with what she had. And when I let go of the story I thought we were writing together, I started writing my own, a better one with room for peace, space, and eventually, hope. Healing doesn't always look like joy. Sometimes it's quiet mornings, drinking coffee alone, not feeling like you're missing anything. Sometimes it's saying no without guilt. Sometimes it's seeing someone else in pain and choosing not to rescue them because you finally know how to rescue yourself. So if this story feels familiar, if you've been the one waiting, hoping, aching, please know this. You can be the one who walks away. You can be the one who heals. You can be the one who becomes whole again. And you don't have to rush. Just breathe. Just begin. And one day you'll look back and be proud of how far you've come. Sometimes I wonder what I would say to him if we ran into each other again. Would I smile? Would I walk away? Would I ask him if he's happy? But then I realize I don't need to know. His story no longer belongs to me, and mine no longer depends on his chapter. I think we meet certain people to remind us what we're capable of feeling, and others to show us what we deserve. He was both, a mirror and a lesson, and I've made peace with that. What I want now is simpler, softer, a love that doesn't require me to shrink myself or wait in the shadows, a love that meets me in the open, in the light. And if I never find it, that's okay too, because the love I've learned to give myself, quiet, steady, patient, is already more than I had before. If you're listening to this and your heart still aches, I just want you to know it's not your fault you love deeply, and it's not your fate to stay wounded forever. You can love again, and next time it will be whole. It's taken me a long time to understand that heartbreak doesn't always look like screaming or slamming doors. Sometimes it looks like sitting quietly in your car after work, knowing you meant something to someone, but not enough. And that's what I had to face. I was enough, just not for him, not in the way I needed. There were moments when I thought I'd never feel that deeply again, that maybe I'd used up all my firsts. But I was wrong. Healing makes room for new beginnings, not always romantic, but real. I've built a life I'm proud of, with friends who know the truth, with routines that bring me peace, and I no longer look for closure in someone else's choices. I found it in my own, in the decision to walk away, to choose myself again and again. That's what I hope for you too, to wake up one day and realize you're not surviving anymore. You're living, fully, honestly, and on your terms. I light candles in the evening now, not for anyone else, just for me. I make tea, read poetry, write in a journal, not because I'm lonely, but because I like my own company again. That's what healing looks like for me, and maybe for you, it'll look different. That's okay. Just remember, you are allowed to outgrow what once felt like everything. You are allowed to want more peace, more honesty, more love, and this time without conditions. There are still moments, quiet ones, when I wonder what would have happened if things were different, if he had met me before her, if he had been free to love me. But I don't live in that what if anymore, because every day I'm learning to live in what is. And what is, right now, is peaceful. I no longer need someone else's love to define my worth. My life isn't waiting on anyone's decision anymore. I choose, I create, I continue. And maybe someday someone will walk into this healed, quiet space I've built with steady hands and an open heart. Or maybe not. But either way, I'll be okay. One of the most difficult things I had to accept was this. Sometimes love arrives through the wrong door. It doesn't mean it wasn't love. It just means it wasn't meant to stay. I used to fear silence. I filled it with music, with shows, with background noise, anything to drown out the ache. But over time, I learned to sit with it. And then I started hearing something else underneath, my own voice. I began writing letters I never sent, to him, to myself, to the version of me who thought she wasn't enough unless someone picked her. And each letter peeled back a little more of the pain until there was something gentle left in its place. I forgave him, not because he apologized, but because I couldn't carry it anymore. Forgiveness isn't saying what happened was okay. It's saying I refuse to let it define the rest of my life. These days, I still catch myself wondering how he is. But the difference is, I don't wish he'd come back. I wish him peace, because now I have mine. And maybe that's the most beautiful ending of all. Not the one where you end up together, but the one where you end up whole. I've learned that not every heartbreak comes to destroy you. Some come to redirect you, to crack open the pieces you buried under survival, and remind you what it means to feel. For the longest time, I thought closure meant answers. Now I know it means acceptance. It's no longer needing a conversation, a goodbye, or an explanation. It's knowing that the story ended and still choosing to write your own. I go on long walks now, sometimes with music, sometimes with silence. I smile more, not because I've forgotten, but because I've integrated. That chapter lives inside me, but it doesn't run the story anymore. And if love finds me again, I won't hide pieces of myself to keep it. I'll bring my whole heart, because that's the version of me I fought so hard to reclaim. To anyone still living in a halfway love, waiting for someone who can't choose you fully, I hope this story reminds you that you are worthy of more, not eventually, now and when you walk away, even if it hurts, even if you cry the whole way out. I promise you, what waits on the other side is lighter, cleaner, and entirely yours.